A year ago, I made a video called The Truth About Boris Johnson, and hold on to your hats because an awful lot has happened since. If only there had been some clues, something in Boris Johnson's past that might have hinted at the way things would turn out.
I've not the faintest idea.
If only we could have divined that bonking Bojo, the fun-loving, Latin-quoting, tussle-haired, zit-wire cruising big bear of British politics would turn out to be an incompetent, lazy, self-indulgent, self-serving Prime Minister who was only in it for himself.
Ha ha ha, richly comic, yes, that's fair.
Actually, there were clues, masses of clues. 57 years worth of clues, in fact. So let's take a look at some of the highlights. One of the most illustrative stories of who Johnson is goes back to his time at Eton. When he was 17, he landed the title role in a school production of Shakespeare's Richard II, and having won the gig, proceeded to do nothing whatsoever. And I mean absolutely nothing. He didn't turn up for rehearsals, he didn't learn his part, and on the day of the big performance, he was obliged to put post-it notes around the stage and then read his lines off them.
Yes, I'm just trying to remember what it is.
The play, as you might expect, was an unmitigated disaster, made worse only by the loud guffawing of a certain Stanley Johnson, who laughed and applauded and egged on his son's pathetic clownery from the back. That story tells us a lot. It tells us so much about his character and, crucially, his sense of entitlement. Boo sucks to all the chumps who actually made an effort. Tally-ho and how's your uncle to the idiots who slavishly followed the silly old rules about learning your part when you're in a play. Johnson subsequently went from institution to institution, but he never stopped being that lazy 17-year-old, immensely privileged public school boy who thinks he can bluff his way forward without doing a shred of work and then get all the credit, all the plaudits and rewards because he's Boris. It was and is the pattern of his life. The other pattern is his history of lying.
Permission to obfuscate.
At Oxford, he managed to get elected president of the Union, but only by pretending to be a Social Democrat when he was actually a Tory. Once again, having won the prize, he proceeded to do sweet fuck all. He was sacked from his first job at the Times in 1988 for lazily making up quotes and then getting caught. Yes, for lying once again. But the setback was a mere trifle, because when you're Boris Johnson, when you're very rich and entitled, when one door shuts, another door opens. So, as Brussels correspondent at the Daily Telegraph, he just started again and made a name for himself, this time precisely for his lies. He made up lies about route master buses and crazy EU directives, and his gullible fans sucked it all up. In 1999, Conrad Black hired Johnson to be editor of The Spectator on the condition that he didn't pursue a political career, and having given his sacred word that he wouldn't, Boris Johnson went straight out and started canvassing for a seat. Conrad Black, the Conrad Black, branded the future Prime Minister ineffably duplicitous, or what you and I might less politely call a bare-arsed liar, and on it goes. In 2001, he was elected MP for Henley and appointed to a standing committee. But guess what? He didn't bother turning up. Indeed, he barely turned up at all to Parliament. But good old lovable Boris trotted on, and everyone politely ignored the fact, and all of his friends in the media puffed him up. In 2004, he dismissed tabloid stories about a 4-year affair with Petronella Wyatt that had resulted in 2 terminated pregnancies as a pyramid of piffle, and when they were proved to be true, refused to resign as Shadow Culture Secretary. How dare people hold mighty Bojo to account? Didn't they know who he was?
Why don't we talk about something else?
The programme.
In the end, Tory leader Michael Howard sacked him. And let's be precise about this, Howard sacked him for being a liar. But Boris Johnson was soon bouncing back. These were mere bumps in the road. I mean, if you or I were sacked for lying twice, then we might struggle to find work. But if you belong to Britain's self-styled upper class, you get a free pass. If you belong in that top tier of society, if you're part of the club with all the connections it affords and all the protection that comes with it, and if you have powerful and influential journalists and newspaper proprietors propelling you along, the normal rules do not apply. Boris Johnson is a bit like that T-1000 android in the Terminator 2 film. You can knock him over with a Routemaster bus, but he'll be popping up straight afterwards and chasing off down the street again. Everything was someone else's fault. Waffle, 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 poor Bojo getting found out. All those nasty people saying things that were true. How dare they? The rules didn't apply to Boris when, as frontman of the Leave campaign, he was happy to lie about all the benefits Brexit would bring. And none of the above was taken into consideration when he sought to become the leader of the country in 2019. The right-wing press and his fellow Tory MPs just let him walk right in. Despite all the warning signs flashing and all the sirens going off, despite everything that had happened in the previous 30 years, despite him obviously being wholly unfit for the job, they backed him. And having finally landed the gig, he simply returned to default mode. He prorogued Parliament to narrow the window in which a no-deal Brexit could be challenged, and then denied that he had lied to the Queen. While campaigning in the 2019 general election, he promised that Brexit could be got done as simply as a microwave meal cooks in an oven. It was untrue, it was a lie. He knew it was untrue. He knew it was palpably a lie. But Boris thought he was stupid, and he thought he could get away with it. And to some extent, he was right. Because all of the people who should have been calling him out didn't. And as he set up home in Downing Street with his new partner, his main preoccupations seemed to have been expensive wallpaper, furnishings that he could not afford, posh takeaway meals that he couldn't afford, and making sure that he got his weekends off so that he could make money from writing, or rather dictating, a biography of William Shakespeare, a man whose lines he hadn't bothered to learn 30 years previously. What happened next should serve as a warning to future generations, because it shows that leadership matters. It shows that you cannot take your peace for granted, and that putting fun people into office just because they have tousled hair and can read an autocue on Have I Got News For You is a really fucking bad idea.
Good point.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson had always aped Winston Churchill, but having won the crown, he proved himself instead to be a trolley. In office, he was an unmitigated disaster. He didn't get Brexit done. He slapped a band-aid on the gaping, bleeding wound of it, crossed his fingers and hoped for the best. Johnson is spoken of as a great brain, but there's scant evidence for it. And on the contrary, he's always lacked imagination. There's never a vision with Boris, beyond things that can alliterate with Boris. It was all the thinnest of gruel, and he might have gone on if it hadn't been for coronavirus. His first few months delivered hot air and photo ops and nothing else. But when the pandemic loomed and slowly made its way towards the UK, he wasted no time at all in wasting all the time he had. He dallied, he dithered, he did fuck all, and as always, he insisted on taking his weekends off. A cross-party committee into the COVID response later concluded that his failure to act decisively in the early days of the pandemic was one of the most important public health failures in British history. Since then, more than 150,000 people have died. And yet, fearing the loss of his own credibility and his own popularity, all he worried about was his public image. Let the bodies pile high, he said, as the bodies piled high. And as the chaos exploded around him, and as the controversy over his key advisor, Dominic Cummings, enveloped Downing Street, all they did was attempt to shore up his own popularity.
I think that what I did was actually reasonable.
Now, we know that while lockdown misery gripped the rest of the country, the Prime Minister and his partner and many members of his staff didn't think that the rules applied. They partied like it was a summer ball at Oxford in 1999. Now, even Johnson, who spent a lifetime laughing things off, is not laughing anymore. And the public have finally caught on. As we were unable to visit our dying loved ones, he was sipping Rioja in his garden. As the Queen prepared to mourn the loss of her husband of 70 years, Downing Street was holding not one, but two parties. He has run out of road. His mealy-mouthed apologies have caught him with his pants down. And this time, he's not simply upset a wife or a discarded girlfriend. He's enraged 65 million people. His greed, his selfishness, his arrogance, his inadequacy, his squalid desperation to hang on to the things he believes are his, and his right, and his emptiness have finally caught up with him. Boris Johnson was always a man without a vision, a man who felt he was owed everything, a man who cared not one jot for his wives or loved ones, a man ready to throw anyone under the bus when it suited his purpose. Coronavirus has revealed the emperor to be naked. It's all a veneer. And the timer is now ticking down on his moment in power. The end can't come soon enough.